Welcome to the NLI USA Signature Speaker Series. I'm Adina Canefield, the CEO of NLI USA. As many of you know by now, we are committed to creating programs inspired by the work and the treasures of the library that reflect our contemporary lives. With that in mind, we bring you our program today, the National Library of Israel, documenting the aftermath of October 7th on North American college campuses. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to remember that this is the 600th day since October 7th and the 600th day of captivity of Israeli hostages. Our hearts go out to all, especially the families of those still held captive. I also want to remember the tragedy of the murders of Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lashinsky that took place here in the United States in Washington, D.C. just a week ago, that has deeply shaken us all. As the National Library of Israel carries forward its work, we assume the sacred responsibility of telling the story of the Jewish people throughout the world and honoring and preserving the memory of all who are part of our ongoing story, including that of Sarah and Yaron. It's a mission that I'm proud to support and one that the library could not carry forward without all of your partnership and support. Thank you for being here today. I'm now honored to introduce our speakers, and I invite you to put questions for them in the Q&A section of the webinar, and they will address those questions at the end of the talk today. We have with us Abby Horowitz, who leads the efforts to document how October 7th and its aftermath have been experienced on North American college campuses. And this is part of the National Library of Israel's Bearing Witness archive that you'll learn more about in a few moments. Abby has worked in a variety of nonprofit and university settings, including Cornell University Hillel and Emory University's Institute for the Study of Modern Israel. She is also a writer and artist whose work has been published in The Forward, Moment Magazine, and many other journals. We also have with us David Makovsky. He's known in the community as the Ziegler Distinguished Fellow at the Washington Institute and the director of the Project on Arab-Israel Relations. David is also an adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins University. He's worked in the office of the U.S. Secretary of State, serving as a senior advisor to the Special Envoy for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. David is also the host of the podcast Decision Points, the U.S.-Israel relationship. He has spoken on over 200 college campuses in the last several years. For me, most significantly, David serves as the board president of NLI USA, the National Library of Israel's U.S. affiliate. Dr. Chaim Neria is curator of the library's Haim and Hanna Salomon Judaica collection. Dr. Neria completed his doctorate at the University of Chicago. He also holds an MA in conflict resolution and peace studies from Notre Dame University. Prior to his appointment at the library, Dr. Neria worked for 7 years as chief speechwriter and head of strategy department at the Office of the President of the State of Israel. With that esteemed panel, we are now going to begin. And I'd like to turn to you, Haim, to have you share a bit of background about the National Library of Israel's broader Bearing Witness initiative. Tell us a little bit about what it is and its genesis, and give us your insights, Haim.
So thank you, and good evening from my side here in Yerushalayim. As you may know, we were supposed to open the National Library, our new building, on October 27th of 2023. So October 7th left us all in shock. on national level and also on the personal level. I myself lost my cousin on October 7 in the fight in Be'eri, and where we all try to gather ourselves and then to try to understand what we are doing now and what our role is as a national library. So we looked around, and what was immediate evidence is that there are these communities on the south, maybe, but then started in the north that were or destroyed or left, and we want somehow to save their history. But then we saw that things are running much faster, and many of the events actually happened in the digital world. For example, the terrorists who took picture of themselves with cameras while they are doing all their atrocities. So at the first days, it was all online available, but then they started take it down. And not only the National Library, but other organizations as well, we've started to ask ourselves how we will preserve history. On my personal side, I can, and I guess it's something that each of us in Israel and around the world can still remember. We were flooded with WhatsApp, emails, all kind of digital ephemera. So the decision first was, and it's not a simple decision to library, because libraries usually were waiting for things to arrive, where they take the time. They collect post events, maybe 10, 12, 20, 30 years. But at this time, we realize that we must be an active actor in the field of memory and denial. So we have to get and to somehow learn how to create an archive that is current archive. It's in real-time events. This is something that we didn't have any experience with that, but we realize that this is very important. So we started to build first. It was eventually our eyes were much more focused on the Israeli setting. Like I said, the kibbutzim that lost friends, that were moving, the communities, the evidence that came from the field. I must say that at that time, I started to ask myself as the Judaica curator, what is our responsibility also to Jewish communities around the world? Because I realized that what's going on in Israel, it's not just something that happens to Israelis. This is a major event that have immediate impact on Jewish communities around the world. We saw the many people gathering, trying to help, prayers, vigils, events. And I said to myself and to my colleagues, we have to collect not only in Israel, but to document also what's going on around the world in Jewish communities. But if in Israel we were almost with no knowledge and how to do that, so in outside of Israel it was even much more difficult. So it took longer, to establish a system that we will be able to receive and to document what happened in Jewish communities around the world.
Can you give a sense of the kinds of things that you're collecting? I know that you mentioned, of course, digital, but just give us a little bit more detail about sort of the kinds of things. I know many people, we think of the library as a place of books. And I think those that are part of our community know it's more than books, but just describe the content that you're collecting as part of Bearing Witness broadly. And then, of course, we'll turn to Abby to go into detail about the work here in North America.
So books, they are parts of our collection, but it takes time. But we already have almost, I think, 2,000 books that in our collection related somehow to October 7th. But of course, we collect almost everything that we able somehow to manage. It could be oral testimonies that are done but by other organizations, Yad Vashem, USC Shoah Foundation, that gather together to create some kind of oral testimonies. It could be music, it is pictures, pieces of art, digital, even WhatsApp, that among the kibbutzim in October 7th, many of the communication was done by WhatsApp. So trying to capture this WhatsApp communication, videos. We have the videos from the terrorists, but there are webcams, security cameras, and whatever is possible, and podcasts, ceremonies in synagogues, and whatever any creative arts that people try to produce. It could be songs, and the main part is trying to somehow archive the internet, if it's something that even possible. So it could be social media, which is very complicated to archive, but at least website, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of websites that have not that were created immediately after October 7th, some related to memory, some to Hasbara, some related to documentation of other pieces. So all this, it's a massive, massive archival work. And I hope that I said all the formats. But again, whatever is possible from our perspective to give it more secure, and to keep it for future generations, we're trying to archive it.
And I just want to have a sense more specifically from you, Chaim, and then we'll turn to David. But with regard to the decision to document what's happening here on college campuses, can you just speak a little bit about that? I know you're a graduate of University of Chicago and Notre Dame. Tell us just a little bit about that decision, and then we'll move to David.
So I would say that when, as an Israeli who, like you said, learned in US academic school, I realized how much the academic experience is defining moment in the lives of young Americans, and we know also in young Jewish students. So when things started to erupt in campuses, we were early on, I must say, we thought we should do something to try to collect what's going on in campuses. It was even before what's happened in the University of Columbia, which brought the environment of US campuses clearly in the front of at least regular Israelis. But we were started thinking how to do that even before. And we had 10 students who gathered for us. It was not so organized, but they did a great job in documenting, regular student documenting what they feel, what they have in their feed of social media, of WhatsApp, side chat. And for example, a student from Cornell that were on our initial program had that side chat threatening the Jewish student that at that time opened a federal investigation. And we took pictures of students doing like a Shabbat dinner for the hostages or lighting candles, or even signs of anti-Semitism or other hard things. I must say that my main or our main point of view is that we are not documenting just the bad things, but we do want to document also how the Jewish people wake up themselves, how they help, how they mobilize themselves, not to be just subjects for others, but as agents who carry on their history forward. So always we try to balance and to say, we are not just about anti-Semitism. If you gave a speech in the synagogue, if you did a Seder night with left a place for, we want this to be documented as well. If you help to Magen David Adom, to soldiers, to people who got injured, whatever activity is part of this bigger picture. So campuses was early on, and unfortunately, we realized, and as long as Abby is doing her work, we are realizing how much is unique work that is done in US.
Great. Thank you so much. David, I know because I try to reach you all the time, and you are usually on a plane or in an airport coming to or from a college campus. You have been on hundreds of campuses over the past several years, and I know how devoted you are to mentoring so many students and to sharing your wisdom on policy in the Middle East, but yet you also are having these informal conversations and observations with students. So I wanted to have the community benefit from your unique window into college campuses and have you share with us what you're seeing on campuses. David, you need to unmute
I'm
yourself.
on mute. Okay, I unmuted. Thank you, Adina, and thank you, Sarah Palmer, for putting this all together, for having this important conversation. So in terms of what I'm seeing, and I should start out by saying it is personal for me. I have my own kids graduated college this month. I would say we're seeing a duality. We're seeing higher level of engagement among Jewish students since October the 7th, but we're also seeing some very ominous developments in terms of the campus climate since that time. On the engagement, I look at different polling data. The American Jewish Committee poll, 45% of American Jews say they're more connected with their Jewish identity after October the 7th. Jewish groups on campus, Hillel, Chabad, all report record levels of engagement. Chabad claims 40% growth. Hillel's growth is also substantial, and I see it when I go on campuses. The students are sometimes turning inward for that kind of support, that kind of sense of communal solidarity. But I think the ominous trends, Adina, are out there too. And there's a Hillel International poll this January, and I think some of its findings are like breathtaking in a very negative way. 41% of Jewish students felt the need to hide their Jewish identity on campus. Only 1 in 4 Jewish students felt compelled to take security. 1 in 4 of Jewish students feel compelled to take extra security precautions. 83% of Jewish college students have experienced or witnessed some form of anti-Semitism since October the 7th. About half, 49.6% of Jewish students reported feeling, quote, very or extremely comfortable with others on campus knowing their Jewish identity. In other words, only half feel comfortable. The other half do not. 41% actively felt the need to hide their Jewish identity. 27% felt comfortable with others. Only 27 out of 100%, right, feel comfortable knowing that others on campus know their views on Israel. And more than about 13% have completely withdrawn from social activities on campus. This is crazy. And while in terms of the non-Jewish number, that tends to be 2% in a typical year. So 13 instead of 2. If you add all this together, it paints a portrait of kind of a high anxiety out there on campus that is alongside this growing sense of engagement. And it's a very worrisome picture. It varies from campus to campus. We see differences between state schools and small liberal arts colleges. I can get into more details, but I just feel that we're seeing both phenomena in parallel. Higher levels of engagement, but a very ominous sense of darkening clouds on campus, and this is very worrisome.
And you know the work of the library that's underway now on campuses, and love you to reflect a little bit on sort of why you think this is important, the role it could play in terms of the impact on students and faculty, as well as when you think about the role of the library. And if you could put this in context and relate it to your knowledge of campus life.
Look, I think it's fair, the NLI and the National Library of Israel is not a typical library. It has a much broader mission than servicing people in its own municipal area of Jerusalem or even the country of Israel. It sees itself really as, and I think justifiably so, and that's why I'm involved, as a library of the Jewish people. We have a Library of Congress in Washington. This is kind of parallel, that has a much wider scope than just being a local or national library. And in this digital age, there's just boundless potential that you can reach people around the world with a click of a mouse on your keypad. The people of the book now have a library. The library existed before the new building, but has been revitalized. And anyone who could see this structure either online or go in Israel should definitely do so. It's a spectacular place. And libraries offer numerous benefits generically, providing free access to information, fostering a love of reading, servicing communal hubs, supporting lifetime learning. But it's also a place to tell a story about current realities. And it's not just a place for collections, but it's a place for engagement. I think of the quote that speaks to me of, it says, libraries store the energy that fuels the imagination. They open up the windows to the world and inspire us to explore and achieve, to contribute to improving our quality of life. That's any library. But what I find so inspiring is this is a library that's had, I think, 500,000 visitors in 2024 at a time the tourists can't yet even visit. So if you connect with the library, you have to do it largely online because only El Al has been flying to Israel regularly. And imagine when tourists can come. But if 500,000 people could converge on a library, when it's not even like I said, without the tourists, it's a sign to me of its endless potential, that the Jewish people have not forgotten to prioritize what has been central to their identity, that you need a thriving culture that links the past and the present to ensure a better future. And it's part of that resilience that will ensure that these bonds with Jewish communities around the world will be stronger and stronger as this crisis subsides. Now, how does it link to bearing witness, as you asked? I think, look, we're the people of the Haggadah, the people who tell a story, who document to the extent we can, the past in order to inspire us to go forward. And I was at a campus, I won't say the name, where Adina, one of the students, raised their hand and said, look, I heard about all this October 7th, but I saw something on social media that tells me that the rapes never happened, and this was not as big of a deal as the way it's being portrayed. And I thought, wow, we've heard about Holocaust denialism, but this is happening now when everything is so visual with social reality, so that social media could be a blessing and a curse. And we have to document this. We have to really realize that there could be a lot of disinformation. And as Chaim said correctly, social media could be ephemeral, everything so digital. So to keep that, to bottle that in terms of what's true, I think is even more and more important and more challenging in this time. And, I keep thinking of, that by documenting, we minimize the denialism. You can't eliminate it, but you try to minimize it to the extent you can, and reminding people of the enormity. And it's, I think of Martin Luther King too, famously said, only when it's dark do you see the stars. So if at a time of bleakness, this library is like almost a ray of sunshine, that people can draw inspiration from these difficult times to aspire to a better future, then we have to do that. And I see the library fulfilling that function for Jews around the world. And I see the Bearing Witness Project as a way of documenting the enormity of the crime and really making sure that we never forget.
Abby, you're at the forefront of all of this and have the task of collecting and documenting and working with the team in Israel on making sure that we get at least a representative sample of what has been happening over the past year and a half, 600 days since October 7th. And as Haim, you mentioned, this is really the first time that the library has in real time been preserving history as it's unfolding. And usually libraries have the luxury of collecting things from the past. And so this is a first for the library. And Abby, I wanted to ask you to share an insider view of what this looks like, of what your work is, and how you're going about documenting this time.
Sure. Thanks, Adina. Well, it certainly is challenging, but like you said, it's feels like such important work, and I'm glad to be able to do it. So what we are doing is a lot of networking. We are trying to make connections with individuals and groups on college campuses across the US and Canada. We are working with about 40 schools right now. We have material from those schools already. Some are still in progress. And we're also working with dozens of organizations because there are lots of national organizations that are very involved in campus affairs, and we want to capture their stories as well in this project. So we are collecting material that documents specific events and incidents, things like the protests, like encampments, like specific encounters with anti-Semitism, etc. But we're also trying to collect materials that document broader experiences of Jewish students, faculty, and staff. So we're trying to get a sense of what it has felt like to be on campus these past 19 months. what kinds of conversations were happening, what was being talked about in classrooms, in faculty meetings, what were professional academic organizations, those discussions, what were they like? So we're really taking a broad view of what we're trying to collect. And that same broad lens goes for audiences. So we're not just looking to individuals on campuses, but we're including some of these communities that are associated with universities. So parents, for example, been doing a lot of outreach to parents who have been organizing quite a bit in response to campus events. We're including alumni and donors. And again, these national organizations that are involved in student affairs. So we're collecting from a wide variety of people. We're also collecting a wide variety of formats. As Chaim mentioned, everything from photos, videos, websites, podcasts, emails, official documents. We're collecting it all, and from a variety of perspectives, because we're trying to have as accurate a record as possible. The other thing I'll mention is that we're taking a fairly maximalist approach in that it's impossible to know right now which piece of information or which type of material is going to ultimately prove the most valuable to historians, other scholars who are looking at this period, trying to understand what happened. So we're trying to build as rich and comprehensive a collection of information as we can, so that this archive is as useful as possible to the people in future generations.
Abby, I know that you actually have some samples to show us of the materials that you're collecting to give everybody a sense of what this looks like. So I'd love to invite you to share some of those things and to go through them and talk them through.
Great. Okay. So we, of course, have a lot of documentation from the protests and encampments. Here's just a snapshot. On the left, some images from Harvard, and on the right from Columbia. These are both from the spring of last year, when things were particularly heated around campuses across North America. We also have documentation from organized Jewish student groups. Here on the left is University of Chicago, an installation to draw attention to the plight of the hostages. On the right is an image from UCLA Hillel, and we are working very closely with many Hillels, including also Hillel International. This is how that Hillel marked the 1-year anniversary of October 7th. So we want to know also what types of programmatic responses were happening on campus, are still happening on campus. So whether that's what types of programs a student group might have put on, such as this flyer for the left, on the left, advertising a student dialogue group at Queen's University in Canada, or whether it's an academic department that's put on lectures or hosted panels about Israel, the war, October 7th in general. We're collecting documentation from those types of events as well. Social media has been mentioned a couple of times already. And of course, this is an arena where a lot of activity has taken place. And as both Chaim and David mentioned, these are not permanent. Anything online is going to be temporary. So it's even more urgent that we archive this material while it's still available. Just going through these very quickly, on the left is a picture of an effigy that was erected at UCLA. You'll notice that it's employing many anti-Semitic tropes. And this was posted by a Jewish faculty and staff group at UCLA that was started in the aftermath of October 7th and has become just an incredibly robust organization. And this is one of the phenomena that we are documenting, in particular, how faculty have responded, we're seeing a lot of organizing amongst Jewish faculty and staff. And it's really interesting to watch. So we're trying to include those in our project as well. In the middle is a post from Students for Justice in Palestine at University of Chicago. This is an image of a tent installation they created on campus with some images of Board of Trustees members expressing their disappointment with the board. On the right, we have a screenshot from SideShot, which Chaim mentioned briefly. This is one of the internal anonymous message boards that several campuses use. So we have a lot of screenshots from these message boards, and they really give a very up-close view of the types of unvarnished conversations that were happening among student populations. Again, some more examples of things you might find around campus. You may have heard in January the incident at Columbia where a class being taught on the history of modern Israel was interrupted by some students and others who came into the classroom and began handing out flyers, anti-Israel flyers, anti-Zionism flyers. Here's an example of one, and this was shared with the archive by a student who was in the class himself. On the right, in case you can't read that graffitied message, it says, "Save a life, kill your local colonizer." This was from the University of Washington. So again, we're trying to document the general context and environment of what people were seeing just as they walked through on their way to class. I mentioned we're including some of these associated communities like alumni. So on the left is an ad taken out in a Texas newspaper thanking the University of Texas administration for how they've been handling things on campus. This is from Alums for Campus Fairness, a group that organizes alumni responses to campus events. And they, like many of these organizations, have grown tremendously since October 7th. On the right, we have a parent hanging up posters in support of Jewish students. This is at the University of Washington. Like I mentioned, there's been a lot of parent activity, and we're trying to document how parents have gotten together, organized, and taken action in support of their students. Finally, this slide just gives you a sense of the broad array of material we're collecting. So this may not be as interesting to look at as some of the photos, but the information is really fascinating. We have a syllabus on Israel and social media that was taught this past fall at Indiana University. So this is a course that's already responding to October 7th. And now we have this document that shows how this professor was responding in real time and integrating current events into what he was teaching. This next document is a letter from a professor at Smith College written just days after October 7th in response to some of the concerning responses among students that were around him. He wanted to share those concerns quite early and personally. To the right of that, so second from the right, is an email thread of administrators at San Francisco State University showing the conversation they were having about how to respond to October 7th and some of the ensuing fallout. This is just an amazing document. It gives us a behind the doors glance at how administrators were figuring out these very complicated issues, how they were talking about them, et cetera. And we're grateful to the administrators at that school who were willing to share this document with us. And finally, on the right, we have a data set from the ADL. This is a compilation of anti-Semitic and anti-Israel incidents that were kept track of from October 7th through the end of 2024. So all of that information will reside within the archive as well. And, I think this just gives a sense of the wide array of information and documentation that we're collecting. And that's hopefully going to be very valuable and useful to people in the future.
Abby, I've watched you work, and the things you've collected and shared with us are just incredible, and we appreciate all of your hard work. Love to hear from you about how this is being received on campus from the students and from the faculty and the administrators that you've connected to and networked with. Just love to hear sort of the impact of this project on the individuals you've been speaking with.
Sure. So people are generally pretty excited to hear about this work and grateful that it's being done. So I think for many people to participate in this archive gives a sense of agency. It's a productive way to respond to some of these very difficult experiences of the past 19 months. I think for some, it can also be a means of processing, particularly for individuals who are sharing their stories. And we have already collected some of these oral histories and will be doing more in the coming months. But when you have to look back at what you've experienced, formulate it into a narrative, and then share that narrative with someone else, we know that that can contribute to a sense of healing and processing. The other thing I'll add, and I think this is particularly true for many of the faculty members I spoke with, but lots of people have experienced things, seen things, heard things that have never made the headlines. They're not going to be found in any newspaper reporting. And yet they're quite impactful and often difficult experiences to hold. So I think this project gives people the opportunity to share some of those experiences that otherwise people may not know about. And not only do they get to share them, but they get to know that these stories are now part of the official historical record, and they're part of this larger story of the Jewish people in this particular moment in time. And I think that's very powerful for people.
And give us a sense of sort of where this project is going, both for the campus. We'll start with Abby, and then I'd love to hear from Haim more broadly, the Bearing Witness Project. Abby, give us a sense of what's ahead on the collection front on campuses.
Sure. So we are still actively collecting from people. So if anyone out there is associated with a campus in any way, we would love to connect and see if you have any material. And we'll be sharing the way that you can send things into us later on. We are also, as I mentioned, going to be starting some oral histories. So that's another very exciting phase that we'll be moving into. We know there's a lot more material out there, and it's just a matter of making those connections and encouraging people to send things in.
Haim, give us a sense of where you're at with the broader Bearing Witness initiative and sort of a sense of the trajectory of the work now and over time.
So I will start with what we have. So in the United States, as you understand, we have mostly the more focused program to collect from campuses, but eventually we wish to have much more. So if people want to contribute and to give us the experience of communities and not just a student, which is very specific population, we would love to have it. In Europe, I have two collectors. They are part-time position that are working. The communities there are much smaller, so they're working on getting materials from the communities. And of course, in Israel, we are working. I will say that there was the emergency time, and now we may not be on that sense of emergency but still accepting materials. We see actively the project as at least 5-year projects, maybe even more. So maybe for the future, even after 5 years official taking care of these materials, that we will accept any materials that we come even later. But we are 2 years. First, we don't know what will be tomorrow, so this is very difficult to say what we are going to do. But I will say that eventually we thought that we will have 2 years of active collection, and then 3, maybe 4 more years of processing these materials. So we are now, I will say, at the stage that we already have a lot of materials, dozens of terabytes of information, and we are in between. So the earlier materials are cataloged and some of accessible. People can get the information or try to take a look. But we have still a lot more materials that are waiting in the line for the process of cataloging, of describing them, of understanding where exactly they belong. So this will be, I believe, in the few more years, the major project. So less a little bit about the collection, more about the processing and trying to analyze what we already have, and to make as much as we can these materials accessible for the public. We didn't mention in all this conversation ethical and legal other problems that are clearly associated with real-time documentation. And I won't get into this question now, but overall, so processing, maybe not all the materials we will be able to have them ready immediately. Some maybe want embargo or to wait a little bit. So, but this is the major project, I think, is now towards processing and about the end of collecting. I think that the campus work in the United States will be at least for the coming year. Then in Europe, certain places, we will continue to collect, but again, more on processing.
It never ceases to amaze me how much work goes into not just the actual collection of the items, but the cataloging and the organizing, and in order to make them properly accessible. And of course, dealing with all the legal challenges that I know you face as well to making things available to the public. So we're going to turn to some questions in just a minute, and some of those questions were around accessibility. And I know we can share in the chat, and then up to everyone that registered and that's on, we can send you some links where you can have some access to materials, not nearly everything that we would like, because it is a very long process for a library to make these things accessible, as Chaim mentioned. Just to close out before we go to questions, David, you're an optimistic person by nature, and in these difficult times, we're always sort of striving and searching for places to, think about the future and hope in a hopeful way. And I guess I just wanted to ask you to reflect on this project and how it relates perhaps to these times that we're in and the work of the library. You mentioned a little bit earlier, but just love you to close out with that thought.
Like I believe that, you know, we're the people of the Haggadah, of telling the story, of linking the past and the present to build a better future. And we need to draw, you know, lessons and hopefully some inspiration from difficult times. As we try to have for a brighter tomorrow. And I do see the library as, you know, sometimes we forget, like, what is everyone struggling for? It's for a thriving culture. And I see the library as an embodiment of that thriving culture. And so, you know, what I said before, I think if people could flock to the library at a time of war, you know, to me, it's a limitless future, because it's a reminder of where our priorities should be. And so for me, I see the library as that, like, kind of core idea of connecting, like, why all the struggling. And it's about, because you believe that the culture is worth defending, and so I see the library in that context, and I see the bearing witness as, don't let the denialists win. And we have to document painstakingly. There might be some stuff we don't want to remember. I get that, but unless we have a you know, an intellectually accurate, you know, we need intellectual honesty and understanding what has been out there. We'll know what to overcome. We'll know how to thrive. So I see this is kind of almost like a vaccine of sorts. Like we have vaccines in COVID, like a vaccine to inoculate ourselves from a lot of hatred and somehow be aware of what's out there. We shouldn't put our heads in the sand, but you know, we have to know what to overcome and use this as an antidote to deal with the denialism that is inevitable to crop up and only grow with time. So I see this as touching all the key bases, which is the importance of the campus, the importance of a thriving culture that NLI represents, and I deeply, deeply believe it. And the importance of this project as a way to ensure that this story is not forgotten, minimized, denied in any way.
Great, thank you. There were many questions, some of which you've answered in the course of the conversation. I think one thing that's particularly interesting for people, and you touched on it, but I would love either Abby or you, Haim, to elaborate, and probably you, Haim, on the social media documentation and how you do that. How do you go about doing that? I know we partner with other organizations that are really focused on it. I know about, maybe you want to talk about the work of the 710 Memorial, but just to talk about the documentation of social media.
So social media is one of the hardest thing to document because most companies are now closing their doors to any kind of archiving. Starting, if we will speak about Twitter or X, so from the time that Elon Musk bought that platform, so the doors to archive the materials there were closed, and the same is to Meta and other social platforms. I think that Instagram is a little bit different, and we do have ways to archive, and of course, WhatsApp, this is what you mentioned. So there are new technologies that help us to archive some of the chats, and it involves other organizations in Israel like עדות 710, that they are very they have also high-tech people that very much into the technical sides. I think that at the future, what we will have to do is to actively try to map maybe important groups or important people and ask them, let's say, could you share with me your Facebook page or what you have written there? Because I don't know, let's say you have 100,000 followers. So this is what we'll probably have to do in the future because so much from what's going on in our life are actually happened in this media and like I said, and the big companies keeping the data for themselves. So we will have to be very creative, and we don't have simple solution.
Can you, Chaim, talk a little bit about some of the official partnerships that we have underway? And Abby, you as well. I know there are official, unofficial. You mentioned Hillel, Abby, of course. Chaim, if you could just elaborate a little bit more. I know we are both with a capital P and a lowercase p partnering with so many people. But
Yeah.
just
Yeah, I think there are, in Israel at least, there are almost hundreds organizations that the National Library tried to be the aggregator, or at least to suggest if you do have materials, if you have your website or collection of stickers or mapping these events so what we try to offer is not to take your place, but please we can help you in the sense of archiving your materials and making sure that they will be safe, that even if some days are over, your work will be kept to the future. In Israel, it's much more simple also because we are working with legal permission to archive the internet. But again, going to communities, to activists, there are many, many all over civil organizations that are dedicated to preserving the memory. And so what we try to do is to give this umbrella. I think that in the US and Europe, this a little bit more difficult. Of course, in Europe, we are partnering with Rothschild Yad Nadiv Europe. They are the one who fund the project of collecting there. And of course, each contract that we are signing with organization to pass or to have these materials, this is based on collaboration. We don't have the materials. They are allowed us to get access. Of course, we have the USC Shoah Foundation. Initially, we started with the Berman Archive, AJL, Association of Jewish Libraries, even in spreading the word. And of course, now that Abby is on the ground, so she can speak because, like I said, every contract, every batch of materials, this is collaboration. So, Abby, maybe you want to add some more.
Sure. So yes, it's very much what Chaim is describing. It requires a lot of partnership. The whole process from start to finish requires a lot of partnership. And we've really been lucky to have found some great partners. So here in the US, ADL has worked with us. We're in process of getting some materials from AJC, the Israeli American Council. There's a lot of organizations that are helping us not only spread the word, but also sharing some of their documentation with us as well.
And there were some questions about how do people know about this, and how are we, spreading the word? And I will answer part of that by saying this program is one of the ways. Abby, Haim, you want to share any more about how you're getting the word out? And then also, I want to encourage people to look at the chat where there's a link to being able to upload materials. And at the end of this session, we'll keep the webinar open with a QR code, I believe, that will be put up so that you can directly upload as well. But I want to just share a little bit, Abby, about how we're getting the word out.
Sure. So like I mentioned, it's a lot of personal networking. I have found that we've had the most success when there is that sort of one-on-one outreach. Obviously, that's a bit labor intensive, but it's getting the results. So that's what's important. We are also partnering with these organizations or with departments on campus to spread the word. And certainly, again, we welcome anyone who's listening today to help us with that mission by either sending us something you might have or by telling someone who you think might want to participate about it. That word of mouth has been really helpful so far.
So it is just after 2 o'clock, and I'm committed to honoring everyone's schedules. I'm going to close out the session. Thank all of you for joining us, for being part of our community. I want to invite all of you to join us for our next program. You'll be getting information about it, and to ask you to continue to be a part of our community. We appreciate all of you. We invite you to visit the library, and we're honored to be able to share your stories with the world. So thank you. And thank you, David and Abby and Haim, for your incredible work, your partnership, and for your contributions to the community. We're going to keep this open, and you can go ahead and use the QR code for those of you that are interested in submitting materials.